Hi everyone, Mr. Guy here. Now I know it's been a long time since I've read the second part of the Twits by Roald Dahl, but I must do it because I really love this book and I hope that you love it too. This is the next section that I want us to look at together. Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit was one of those very hairy face men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes and his nose, were covered with thick hair. The stuff even sprouted in revolting tufts out of his nostrils and ear holes.
Mr. Twit felt that his hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand, but in truth he was neither of these things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now at the age of 60, he was a bigger twit than ever.
Next chapter, Dirty Beards. As you know, an ordinary, unhairy face like yours or mine simply gets a bit smudgy if it's not washed often enough, and there's nothing so awful about that. But a hairy face is a very different matter. Things cling to hairs, especially food. Things like gravy go right in among the hairs and stay there. You and I can wipe our smooth faces with a flannel and we quickly look more or less all right again. But a hairy man cannot do that. We can also, if we are careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces. But not so with hairy men. Watch carefully next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you will notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it's impossible for him to get a spoonful of beef stew or strawberry ice cream or chocolate sauce into it without leaving some of it on his hairs.
Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he ate. As a result, and because he never washed, there were always hundreds of bits of old breakfast and lunches and suppers sticking to the hairs around his face. They weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe those off with the back of his hand or his sleeve while he was eating. But if you look closely, not that you'd ever want to, you would see little tiny specks of dried up scrambled egg stuck to the hairs, and spinach and tomato ketchup and fish fingers and minced chicken and all other disgusting things Mr. Twit liked to eat. If you look closer still, hold your noses, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. If you peer deep into the moustachy bristles sticking out over his upper lip, you would probably see much larger objects that had escaped the wipe of his hand. Things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese, or a mouldy old cornflake, or even the slimy tail of a tinned sardine.
Because of all of this, Mr. Twit never really went hungry. By sticking his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the hairy jungle around his mouth, he was always able to find a tasty morsel here or there to nibble on. What I'm trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was a foul and smelly man. He was also extremely horrid, as you will find out in a moment. Mrs. Twit, the next chapter. Mrs. Twit was no better than her husband. She did not, of course, have a hairy face. It was a pity she didn't, because that at any rate would have hidden some of her fearful ugliness. Just take a look at her.
Have you ever seen a woman with an uglier face than that? I doubt it. But the funny thing is that Mrs. Twit wasn't born ugly. She had quite a nice face when she was young. The ugliness had grown upon her year by year as she'd got older. Why would this happen? I'll tell you why. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a double chin and sticky outy teeth. But if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely.
You're plotting something, Mrs. Twit said, keeping her back turned so he wouldn't see that she'd taken out her glass eye. Whenever you go all quiet like that, I know very well you're plotting something. Mrs. Twit was right. Mr. Twit was plotting away like mad. He was trying to think up a really nasty trick he could play on his wife that day. You'd better be careful, Mrs. Twit said, because when I see you starting to plot, I watch you like a wombat. Oh, do shut up, you old hag, Mr. Twit said.
He went on drinking his beer, and his evil mind kept working away on the latest horrible trick he was going to play on the old woman. Suddenly, as Mr. Twit tipped the last drop of beer down his throat, he caught sight of Mrs. Twit's awful glass eye staring up at him from the bottom of the mug. He made him jump. I told you I was watching you, cackled Mrs. Twit. I've got eyes everywhere, so you better be careful.
So, after reading 3 chapters together, I would like us to draw a character profile or a character for our wall. This is what it looks like, a little bit, or mine does anyway. Now, what you need to do is you need to decide whether you're going to look at Mr. Twit or Mrs. Twit. Now, I'm going to look at Mr. Twit. So at the top, I need to write his name. Mr. Twit. Now, on the outside of our character, we're going to write down all the things that are true about them. And on the inside of our drawing of the body, we can either choose to draw things like Mr. Twit's horrible beard, or we can write down things that explain how Mr. Twit feels about things. Like, for example, he thinks that having a hairy face makes him look wise, makes him look grand. So he feels that being really hairy is a good thing. Something that would go on the inside could be whether he likes his wife or not. Do you think he likes his wife? I think they're always playing mean, horrible tricks on each other. So I'm not sure he does like his wife. But maybe I'll leave that off for a minute. And maybe I'll go back to drawing the hairiness of Mr. Twit. Now on the outside of my character on the wall, I've written favourite, friend and facts. Now a fact is, he is 60 years old. One of his favourite foods is Stilton cheese, which is a very smelly cheese. At the moment, I don't know whether he's got any friends or not, so I'll leave that one blank for now and I'll come back to it later. If you've got the book at home, you can go to the chapters and you can look through to find out the special adjectives describing words. But also, it might be really fun if you make up some of the answers for yourself. Plus also, I want to see how brilliant your drawing of Mr. Twit looks. How can you show him having lots of bits of food all tucked up in his beard? Of course, you can draw Mrs. Twit as well and think about her and her hair or her glass eye or what exactly it is that makes her not look as pretty as she used to when she was younger. I hope you draw your character on the wall really brilliantly for me. I look forward to seeing them. Take care. Bye.